The late afternoon sun filtered through the crystal chandeliers of the Grand Azure Hotel in Boston, casting prismatic patterns across the pristine white tablecloths. Margaret Chen stood at the edge of the main dining room, her server's vest pressed to perfection, her dark hair pulled back into the regulation bun that made her scalp ache by midday. She'd been working at the Grand Azure for 3 months now, and every shift felt like walking through a museum where she didn't quite belong. "Table 7 needs water," barked Gerald, the head waiter, brushing past her with the casual disdain he reserved for new hires. "And for God's sake, smile. This isn't a funeral home." Margaret forced her lips upward and lifted the heavy water pitcher, making her way across the dining room. The carpet was so thick her footsteps made no sound. She'd come to Boston from a small town in Ohio with nothing but a business degree, mountains of student debt, and dreams that felt increasingly foolish with each passing day. The corporate job she'd been promised had evaporated when the startup folded. Now, at 26, she was serving water to people who probably spent more on a single meal than she made in a week. Table 7 was occupied by the Whitmore party. She'd learned to recognize the regulars by name, even though they never learned hers. James Whitmore III sat at the head, a man in his early 50s whose silver hair and tailored suit spoke of old Boston money. His wife, Elizabeth, wore pearls that caught the light with every slight movement of her head. Their son, whom Margaret had learned was named Daniel, sat between them, looking distinctly uncomfortable in his own expensive suit. As Margaret poured water into their crystal glasses, she couldn't help but overhear their conversation. "The board meeting is Thursday," James was saying, his voice carrying the easy authority of someone who'd never been told no. "I'll need you there, Daniel. It's time you started taking a real interest in the family business." "I've told you, Dad," Daniel replied, his voice tight. "I'm not sure that's the path I want to take." "Not sure?" James's laugh was cold. "You're 32 years old. How much longer do you need to find yourself? This isn't a negotiation." Margaret moved to the next glass, her hand steady despite the tension radiating from the table. She'd learned to make herself invisible during these moments, to become nothing more than a functional part of the furniture. "Perhaps we could discuss this later," Elizabeth interjected smoothly, her voice like honey over ice. "We're in public, dear." Margaret finished pouring and retreated, but not before catching Daniel's eyes. For a moment, she saw something there, a flash of recognition, of shared understanding. They were both trapped, she realized, just in different kinds of cages. The dinner service continued in its relentless rhythm. Margaret delivered plates of seared duck and herb-crusted salmon, poured wine she couldn't afford to smell, and cleared courses barely touched. Her feet throbbed in her practical black shoes, and her lower back had developed a permanent ache that she was beginning to think might never go away. It was during dessert service that everything changed. Margaret was carrying a tray laden with creme brulee and chocolate soufflé when her foot caught on the edge of a chair leg that had been pushed out slightly too far. Time seemed to slow as she felt herself falling forward, the tray tilting, gravity becoming her enemy. She managed to twist her body at the last second, taking the impact on her shoulder and side rather than face first. The tray clattered to the floor with a sound that seemed to echo through the entire restaurant. Porcelain shattered. Cream and chocolate splattered across the carpet like abstract art. The dining room went silent. Margaret lay there for a moment, stunned, her cheek pressed against the expensive carpet that now smelled of burnt sugar and cocoa. Then the pain hit, sharp in her shoulder, spreading through her side. But worse than the physical pain was the mortification that flooded through her like fire.